It is Wednesday, June 10th. This is the Take It Deep podcast. We are bringing you the Everyday Throwing Show, episode 3. Tonight I have my usual gang of suspects, California Jim Vatcher, as well as Revolution Throwing founders, Virgil Vasquez, and current associate head coach at the Boston College University, Alex Trezza, former member of my wedding party, which I always mention. Boys, how we doing? It's great to have you again. We're on episode 3 already, which it's flying by. We keep getting bigger and better, as evident by the guests we brought on tonight. I trust everyone as well. We are going to introduce China McCarney, who is the vice president at Jaeger Sports. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Jaeger Sports, it is kind of a triangle of power at the top. You have Alan Jaeger as the basic grower and organizer and the guru, so to speak. You have Jim Vatcher, who was also there at the very beginning stages, and now you have China. Reminds me, gentlemen, of the 90s Dallas Cowboys when they had that dynasty going, the three-headed monster. Alan is obviously Troy Aikman, the quarterback, calling the plays. Jim, you are, in my mind, the playmaker, which was Michael Irvin. You probably had a little bit better off the field life than Michael, but you guys, the playmakers. And now we've got the Emmitt Smith, the guy who's in the trenches, as far as I can tell from the outside looking in, the guy who gets most of the volume, gets all those yards in between the end zone, and is probably definitely essential to the whole system and making it go. China McCarney, great to have you on. We're going to get into, obviously, your story, how you came about as the VP of Jaeger Sports. It's also the first night of the Major League Baseball draft, and things are very different this year in regards to the draft. We're going to go deep into that as well. But let's start off. China, welcome to the show. It's great to have you. I really appreciate coming on. Talk to us a little bit. Take us down the path. How you got hooked in with these two lunatics at Jaeger Sports, who I call good friends, and kind of how the whole thing evolved, and catch us up to today, right where you sit right now.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, thanks so much for having us on. I've watched the other videos with Lunatic number 1 over there, California Gym, and it's always fun. 2 thumbs up. But I was introduced to Jaeger Sports. I went to a camp when I was 12 years old. My dad had heard about this throwing camp in our hometown, didn't know anything about it, and I fell in love with the program right away. I fell in love with the freedom to be an athlete while training, with the physical side. And then as I started to get older, showcase circuit, get recruited, I realized how important the mental game was, and was really drawn to that aspect of Jaeger Sports. And Alan Jaeger became sort of my mentor. And I started kind of touring the country at about 16, doing a lot of throwing demos, long toss demos with Jim and Alan, putting on some shows and having some epic long tosses. And at that time, that's 17 years ago. So Vatchkins, you were about 38. And at 38, this guy still, I mean, he's 55 now and has an absolute cannon still, but we put on some fun shows and did the program throughout my playing career. And then when my playing career ended, was approached by Alan, kind of a mutual approach to get involved with the business side, and made a astounding salary of $40 per week when I first started. It was just amazing. And have been shoulder to shoulder with Jim every day in the office, just kind of since 2012. And that's been the fun part, the journey, the evolution, to have his mentorship and just feel like we're on a team competing to make Jaeger Sports as good as we can on a daily basis, which means impacting young athletes and helping them both mentally and physically achieve whatever it is they want in the game.
So you were involved at a very young age and quote unquote working for the brand as early as 16. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, I was doing, like, one of my earliest memories. I think I was 17. I did a pro camp. I did a demonstration for the Jaeger Sports Pro Camp with Jim Vatcher, and it's one of the throws that we talk about quite often because it was a bunch of pro guys watching a 17 and a 39-year-old throw, and we put on a show, and it was pretty cool that day. So yeah, it's been 16, 17 years of representing the brand.
And did you think at that young of an age, by the way, Virgil and Alex, I mean, you might want to think, we get some 15, 16-year-olds. I don't know if we should even talk about that, but, that's just that really actually, to me, to be honest with you, it's really unique to have somebody that young, be involved at that level. Did you see at that young age the value, obviously, of the throwing program, the long toss, the arm circles, the arm band, everything that they were doing? Did you think it would translate down the road for you as much as it did then? Or was it just something that you knew felt good with your arm? Or what drew you at a young age to the whole process?
I think that's a great question. I think it was a combination of both. I think the first and foremost, it was the way my body felt and the way my arm felt and the way I had confidence every day coming to the park that I knew my arm was going to be prepared, it was going to be healthy, and all I had to worry about was competing. And so that was just a byproduct of doing the program. But longevity, I talked to Jim and Alan. I was fortunate enough to be on the inside from a young age. So they always talked about longevity and how it would translate year after year of building a foundation. And so I think it was a combination of both. And, it was funny when I was a freshman in high school, I got laughed at for doing bands. And then they saw me do long toss. And the next year, our entire team had bands. So it's funny how that works out. But I definitely felt and saw the impact pretty right away with the physical side.
So even at that time, and when you're roughly whatever age you just described, doing band work was something out of the norm most of the time for you, for your teammates, for people that were around you. So you got those awkward looks and that, what is this guy doing? Which is interesting to hear, especially since, to me, when I discovered these guys and was lucky enough to play with Jim in the late 90s, and then in 2000 and now on 20 years later, once I got into it, I felt like everyone was doing it. And then you go to an ABCA baseball convention, and Alan speaks in 2004, I believe that was, Jim, right? 04?
Yeah.
And people were still looking at him like he had 12 heads and weren't buying in. So it's interesting to hear what was that like being the only guy? I know you just described a year later, then everybody's on board. Was there any questions? Were the people asking your dad? Were people asking you, what is this? What are you doing? Or was it kind of like, this guy's a witch doctor, get away from him, his arm's going to explode?
Yeah, I think I grew up in an incredibly small town, 6,000 people, kind of rancher town. And so high level of athletic training didn't exist there. So when I first took the bands and started to do it, I can remember a specific memory doing bands on the basketball court on chain link fence. And as a freshman, you're terrified of what upperclassmen think of you, right? So you don't want to do anything weird. And so there was this, kind of, gray area of, I didn't want to be weird, but I knew how good it made my arm feel. And so it was a little tricky, but once, like I said, I made varsity as a shortstop as a freshman and kind of introduced it to them, and they felt the way that it felt to prepare the arm to throw. It changed everything. And like I said, and this was back in 2002 where we had the old clip. It was a 3-part clip, only black bands. There wasn't any Vasquez Mustangs purple and gold bands, but we had 15, 20 black J bands in 2003, which was my sophomore year in the program, and everybody was doing them to try to long toss over the fence. So it was pretty wild, the little 12-month progression.
And it's funny you say you came from a town where like the high level of training wasn't available, wasn't a thing. I think that in speaking to both the products, whether it's the Perfect Throw from Revolution Throwing and whether it's obviously the Jaeger Sports program, the beauty of it is no matter what, you can get high level training by using the products, no matter where you live, no matter what your situation is. I think that is ultra important. We live in an age, and from my observations, and I'm sure you guys will agree, where it is very specialized now between lessons, between pitching coaches, hitting coaches, you have strength coaches, you have agility coaches, and I'm talking about kids who are 11, 10, 11, 12 years old. I grew up probably very similar to Jim, at least, and Alex, knowing how he grew up. It was my dad told me what I should do, shouldn't do, threw me BP. He had this crazy notion. I have to tell the story because it's amazing to me. He had this crazy notion. I was a pitcher. If you looked at me body type wise, I'm not going to be an outfielder. That's just how it is. But for some reason, what he would do every day, we were lucky enough to have a baseball field behind our house. He would make me go into the outfield and he would hit me fly balls and he would make me throw them back in. And he did this we did this almost every day from the time I was 11 till God knows when. And I used to tell him, this sucks. It's boring. I don't want to do it. He figured out or thought that would be the best way to train my arm. And I don't know if it was dumb luck. I don't know if it was coincidence, but there's no doubt in my mind I would not have had the velocity I had or had as good an arm if I didn't do that. I mean, that's obvious now. But you talk about someone that was way out in front of this thing, probably without knowing it. You know, I don't know if maybe he just wanted to get back at me for, you know, pissing him off during the day and make me run after fly balls. I don't know what it was. But the fact is, he had me long tossing back into the home plate area from 200 plus feet at least 4 times a week, without abuse on my arm or anything like that, just as kind of a routine. And it still blows my mind thinking about it today. So it is good to see, obviously, how products like the guys you have, I mean, think about it. You can be in your basement and use portions of Jaeger Sports. You can be literally anywhere and use the perfect throw, provided you're within what? Like, well, we're all about safe distancing nowadays. If you're in 6 feet of someone, you can use your product, right? And that, to me, makes things – this day and age, everybody wants things at their fingertips. They want instant gratification, and they want convenience. And that's what this stuff is in a way too. So it does cater to that. But more importantly, guys, it really does. And I don't want to affect anybody's livelihood, but, you know, everyone's got a coach for something these days. And Revolution Throwing hits it on the head, guys, where you guys always say when using your product, it kind of teaches you itself. And that, to me, is a great thing. Obviously, the same thing with Jaeger Sports. When I lived in the Northeast and I couldn't get out in long toss, I would do a band routine and maybe even ramp it up a little more, and my arm would feel like I long tossed. Whether I did or not, whether it was psychological or not, I know the muscles got worked that way. And when there was 18 inches of snow outside, it is what it is. I could still do that. I could still do arm circles. I could still do that. If I had the perfect throw, I mean, obviously I could still do that. And to me, I think that that's really, really important, especially now. We're going to get into, obviously, you have to talk about, we're still kind of in lockdown. Baseball is not being played. The major league level, who knows? That's a coin flip right now, whether that's going to happen, unfortunately. But when we can't have our everyday routine and we can't get to the field and we don't have, I mean, Alex, a 55-game college season, me, a 50-game college season. We can't have summer baseball. We can't have a lot of things, even though some of them are starting to open up. There are a lot of leagues that will start July 1, right? Now, for you guys who train athletes, and specifically throwing athletes, my concern right now is these leagues fire up on July 1. Well, what have guys been doing to actually get themselves ready to play? Because now that's going to come quick. And I've made it a habit, obviously, of keeping up with our guys to make sure, you know, that from a throwing perspective, they're still ready if they will play. But this is where the importance of having products like this comes into play too. Because you can keep those tabs on yourself at least and get work in and do the things you need to do. Is there, in your guys' minds, and anybody just go ahead and answer, is there a concern on your end where July 1, all of a sudden AAU is back, at least in the Northeast, I know it will be. And not only that, the college summer leagues, there'll be some popping up and town leagues. Is there concern in your guys' mind where, hey, a lot of guys have just kind of done what they could, but it's not going to be enough, and then guys run out there and just get going too fast too soon? Is that a concern in anybody's, you know, in the way anyone's thinking? Like I said, feel free, anybody.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, I deal with it every day with, you know, the guys we talk on the phone with recruiting, and then just our guys. So, you know, we're really in the third phase with the guys that are on the team at PC. We're in the third phase of their throwing program. And we really started, we gave them about a week off when this whole thing happened. And I've been really monitoring how much they've been throwing and the long toss. And we have a lot of guys that are going to start, like you said, supposedly July 1st. So my job as the pitching coach was, I'm going to get you guys ready, and then we're going to back off if we have to, rather than say, oh crap, they're going to play, and like hurry up and go. I've had some guys, you know, want to go quicker, but they know me. I'm very conservative, and I want to make sure they're more ready than they need to be, really. And for me, most of the guys are going to be, you know, maybe an inning the first time out, and even the second, even the third time out. So I'm getting a little bit of pushback from my horses that want to go. It's important, you know. I told them, I said, I want you to be over ready, and I want you to be mad at me about you not pitching enough rather than go out there. And then the other side, really quickly, the recruiting. I got I got sophomores in high school right now that went out this first weekend. They threw 4 or 5 innings, and I'm just like, I'm telling them on the phone, like, just be careful. I can't really lead them. I can give them advice, but it's scary. I think you're going to see a lot of injuries. Maybe not even right away, but you're going to turn around in the fall and the winter. You're going to have a lot of kids that are coming up with some injuries they never had before.
So Virgil, as a minor league coach with the Minnesota Twins, pitching coach, what was kind of the blueprint for you guys not knowing anything? Okay, so you guys get shut down before you even get started. You're not knowing if and when the season is going to start. What kind of direction did that go for your guys on your staff? And was there a blueprint set out once you guys figured it out, or what was the Twins' stance on the whole thing?
I loved our approach because there's not many, not often, I've never seen it, where you get ready for a season. So we ramped up in spring training, and then now you're game ready, but now you practice. So I was like, okay, guys, now you get an opportunity to learn and practice and grow. You get to practice. Like, there's something about throwing yourself rather than throwing to it with a coach there and then coming back to the coach. And there's something about having a coach there. Both are positive. And so our guys are throwing 1 to 2 bullpens a week, playing catch, long toss, doing their routines and staying off the mound once or twice a week. Most guys about twice a week. And the guys I'm talking to, they're like developing cutters. They're improving their changeups, fastball velo. This one guy threw 97s, never touched it before. So it's just like, it could have been a time to have been, oh no, but it wasn't that. It was a time to, oh wow, I get a chance to develop. I get a chance to move forward. I get a chance to like hone in my skills without the like stress of having to compete right now. So then I can go back with my weapons.
So that's basically a silver lining too, right? There's been a lot of time for that kind of that self-assessment of yourself as a player. You've unfortunately had a lot of time to do that and develop and obviously, like you said, come up with maybe a new pitch, maybe find, a flaw in your mechanics that you can work on without worrying about getting batters out and things like that. For China and Jim, on your perspective, obviously working with a ton of athletes and a ton of kids per se, and Jimmy, especially from a position player standpoint, how do you think it affects the position guys? I mean, obviously it's not going to be as much, and we understand that, but what was the importance and what was, if anybody asked your advice in this time, was it basically just let's stay on course here and hopefully when we're able to play, you'll be able to and we'll be okay? Or was it, did you guys have anything to give anyone? Like if they did ask, like anything you could recommend? Or was it just, let's just kind of wait and see, map it out that way? Or how did you guys approach it?
Well, for me, I think you can recommend, look, kids are playing all year round for the most part. There's not enough training for the most part. Kids don't train that much. They play all year round. Their arm never has a chance to really explore training and long toss. So it is a huge opportunity. For us, it would be, you can take it a little slower, but you could do an every other day, nice long toss. You can get your arm in electric shape. The biggest issue is the motivation. If the kids were anything like my kids, they lost all motivation for baseball. They really did. I mean, I was on a little long toss session with my sons. We were kind of in a routine, and then they just, you're gonna come back April 15th. No, it's gonna be May 15th. No, it's gonna be June 15th. No, it's gonna be July 1st. Well, it's hard to keep them. I could have kept it up for sure. I think as a player, definitely as an older player, I would have taken the opportunity to be electric when, like Alex says, be over prepared if anything, because this is going to be tricky for some kids that have lost all motivation. And then all of a sudden they don't really believe it's going to be July 1st. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And then all of a sudden, oh crap, and my coach needs me to pitch 3 innings today or whatever, come from shortstop and pitch. It's going to be very tricky navigating. There's going to be certain kids that are going to be way above the curve. And I think a lot of them, I'm talking more the younger kids because I'm coaching Little League. Most of them will be, you got to be real careful with them. You got to limit them to 20 pitches or something like that. Real coaches have to be real careful with these kids coming back.
Do you think that, I mean, and again, this is kind of for everybody. Do you think that, let's just take the piece of this puzzle out where we didn't get to play baseball. Okay. We get that. We didn't get to play games, so to speak. and Virgil, you touched on this. Do you think that overall maybe a little bit of a reset, maybe a slowdown, maybe some time to kind of really do some self-assessment, some coaching of yourself to a certain extent? And even if you have someone that you give lessons or you get lessons from and you have a pitching coach, do you think there are real advantages to kind of having that happen? I mean, it was forced on us, but coming out on the other end now? I mean, Virgil, you explained some positive things that your guys got from this, and Alex, you and I can both attest to, obviously the rigors of playing in Northeast baseball in February, March, and April. I think there are some positive things as well. And sometimes I thought about this today. I think like in the middle of my college career, I don't know, I might have liked one period where, I could have had that little reset. I mean, it was obviously physically impossible if you're healthy, and hopefully you are. But it really does give you, oh, my God, it's the spring, and I don't know when I'm going to play again, but I do know that I can still throw 1 or 2 pens a week. I can still work mechanics. I can still do this outside of the parameters of my college team, outside of the parameters of, my organization if I'm a pro ball player, outside of my high school team, whatever team or organization I'm with. I can do this now on my, quote unquote, on my own. I think what that would have done is really define guys in a lot of ways, defines your motivation, defines, what you hold important. And, as Jimmy said, too, kids in a certain age group are just going to get steered in a million directions, right? And then they're going to keep getting let down. And that has an effect. We're going to play starting May 1st. No, wait, it's June 1st. And you keep pushing back. But I'm talking specifically about the upper echelon high school kid all the way up, college, pro ball. China, what's your thought on that in terms of, like, this kind of feels like a very self-defining period if you use it the right way, to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's something that I've been talking about a lot with people is after the initial shell shock where we've never experienced anything like this and you have to just gather your bearings and, it's okay to not be okay for a little bit, right? Because we had never experienced this. But after that, what are you going to do with the greatest gift of time you've ever gotten in your entire life, right? We've never gotten this gift of time to allocate to our own specific training, our own specific education. And so like you said, you hit the best term you could use for this is it's going to define guys, which oftentimes off-season training, the things they do when they're alone is what defines them anyway. Jim's a great example of that. He was dedicated to his preparation, taking care of his body so that when game day came, he was ready. And so this, call it a 90-day period, whatever it's been, you're going to see as soon as guys report back to you, that guy ate and sat on the couch the entire time. That guy looks better than he did before we left, and he used this time accordingly. So I absolutely think it's a defining time, not just for athletes, but for humans in general. A lot of us were confined to our homes, and we had to kind of make up new routines. And like one of the exercises I heard that I loved is analyze this time you've had and think about the 10 positive things that you wouldn't have done if it wasn't for quarantine, and implement those into your everyday life once we get back to quote unquote normal. And that could be for an athlete too. What did you do either mentally or physically to get yourself more prepared during this time that you wouldn't have done in the past, and implement that even when we go back to normal and you have team organized events and whatnot, implement those things that worked for you during this time into your normal everyday routine. So I definitely think it's going to be a definer for some guys, and coaches are going to know right away which guys, went this way and plumped up and which guys come back looking good and their arms in shape. So.
Well, I do want to mention, China, that you are the first guest of my podcast that's named after a country in East Asia. So that's something I did have to bring up. So congrats on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
We just talked a little bit about, obviously, the defining characteristic or what this will bring out, this quarantine and the situation we're in, which leads me to my next point. We've talked about draft day being today. I believe it started a minute ago, Eastern time. It's 7 p.m. We are going 5 rounds this year. Major League Baseball has decided it will be a 5-round draft with then obviously the Wild West of free agent signings after those 5 rounds. I think that talking about guys who do put themselves in that position most of the time to get a chance to play professional baseball, get drafted, do have a lot of the things we just described kind of innately. They have that drive. They have that, everybody on this panel obviously had that, as well as natural ability. Out of the five, I probably had the least natural ability of everyone here. I'm pretty familiar with everybody's playing resume. However, going into it this year, guys, it's 5 rounds, and then it's who knows. And I talked to a couple of scouts the last 2 days who have heavy interest in one of my players. They don't know what's going to happen come Sunday when they're allowed to get back on the phones and talk to people. So it is going to be, one scout told me, it will be the Wild West. And we're going to figure this thing out. So to me, I always think of draft day as the day where, dreams are made, right? Dreams come true on draft day for a lot of guys. For a lot of guys, unfortunately, they don't, and reality sets in and all those things. That's the other side. But for the guys that do, that is, and we're going to get into all of your stories individually, but for the guys that do, that is something that they will never forget, something that, will always stay with them. And that sense of accomplishment, that pride, and just that fruit of all the labor that they probably did to get there is really just summed up in someone calling your name and someone calling you on the phone and offering you your dream. Let's just call it what it is, right? Until you find out that your dream entails taking 26-hour bus rides and, doing the things that we all experienced, but you loved every minute of it. So I think the worst part about this situation we have right now is you're going to get guys who are labeled, whatever that means, 6th through 20 round talent, let's say, okay? Jimmy, I believe you were drafted in the 20th round. Alex, you were what, 18? So let's think about this. Those guys aren't going to get that opportunity to have that their name, they can't watch the draft tracker online. They can't see their name pop up. Usually you get the call before anyway, but you guys know what I mean. Like, you're not going to get that same experience. And I think that is, to me, the worst part about today. Because quite frankly, after those 5 rounds, it is what it is. But let's go back. Let's rewind here. We'll start with Jim. You had the longest. It's been the longest since your draft. So we'll start with you. Take us back to that day. You've told a little bit of the story of how a scout worked you out after your college career essentially was done. Just take us back through those steps. Specifically, the quick story of, somebody reaching out to you, working you out, and then the draft comes and how that whole day was, what you were doing when you got the call. Like, take us through that if you can.
Yeah, so I was a senior at Cal State Northridge, and I finished my senior year. And as far as I knew, my career was over. I was 5'8", I was a small outfielder. I had a total of 0 scouts talk to me in 4 years of college. I was on nobody's radar. I ended up being a first-team All-American. It was a Division II school at the time, but I had a great year. And I played that year as if it was my last, which was kind of interesting because I really thought it was going to be my last year ever playing baseball. And when you play baseball, when you think it's your last year of ever playing, you really appreciate everything. I'm telling you, I appreciated every moment of that season. I appreciated the base running after, the training of base running, which you're running the 5 sprints to first and the 5 to second and then the triple. Usually it's just dreadful, but I would actually appreciate that, thinking this is the last time I'm going to be running the bases in my life, So anyways, that's a different story, but just if guys can get the mentality of playing like it's their last year, no matter what year it is, it's pretty powerful. Anyways, I was coming back from the beach. I live in Southern California. I was coming back from the beach, and I was living at my parents' house, and they had this old time answering machine where you literally had the tape in the machine, and there would be a flashing light, and you'd have to push the button to rewind the tape. And that's what I did. I came back from the beach one day, and this was maybe a week or 2 after my days of playing were over, and it was a Philly scout. Said, "Hey, I just want to take a look at you." And so I was like, heck yeah. So I met him. I drove 45 minutes, met him at this field. And ironically, I worked for a throwing company. Ironically, the care I put into my arm, not knowing, I was training basically for that day in front of that scout. All those days of long tossing, of working my arm out, pushing my distance, and really, trying to get velocity out of my arm. That's the first thing this scout wanted to see. That's the first thing. He took me to right field. He set me to right field. He put someone on third base and said, "Here you go. I want to see what you got." I warmed up beforehand, and I put on a show that day. I put on a show. I threw 5 missiles across the diamond. I one hop, split the base in half. And that was the first impression I made on this guy. And look, this is the only guy that talked to me, the only guy that looked at me. And he's the guy that drafted me. In the 20th round, I got a call from that same phone that's stuck to the wall with a 1-inch cord, that you can't hide. You're not going anywhere. You're right in the middle of your kitchen/dining room. And I remember that you're drafted to play professional baseball. It's kind of that same feeling I got when I got the call to the big leagues. It's this moment of exhilaration and excitement, and at the same time of pure terror. It's this weird thing of excitement and like, whoa, what am I getting myself into here? And so this scout came to my house. I had it in my head from talking other teammates on my Northridge team, said, "Oh, you know what? You're better than this guy that signed for 40 grand. I mean, he was a junior, but that's beside the point. I was a senior. You're better than him." I had it in my head that I was at least worth 20 to 40 grand. And so my big negotiation, it was just funny to me looking back on it, because he came and said, we're offering you $1,500. And I was trying to keep a straight face. So my big negotiation with this guy, I said, "Can I get more?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Okay." That was my big negotiation. Then I would have played like all these guys. I would have played for free. I mean, I'm off to play professional baseball, but that's my story. It was a very exciting moment. And I feel for these kids now. I I mean, right now, being I was a 20th round pick. I'm toast. I'm toast in this situation. You're scrambling big time, and I feel for these kids that are guys like me that need to be seen on an everyday basis. I'm not a guy that's going to be like, "Oh yeah, this guy for sure. I got to draft this kid." No, you got to see me on an everyday basis to appreciate me. And I don't know if this is the last day of my career, if this is the year I'm getting drafted.
So talk about return for investment. I mean, $1,500 later, you're in the big leagues with the Phillies. I mean, yeah, that guy probably earned a promotion if he was still with the organization. I mean, that's a pretty good return on investment there. Alex, I was probably my second year in college coaching when you were a junior at Stony Brook. I was at a Division II school right down the road, and Stony Brook was my hometown. So I knew of you even before we hooked up later on. And got in coaching together and all those things. I remember you as a guy that they brought in to play shortstop almost right after a guy named Joe Nathan, who had a pretty good career. Obviously not as a shortstop, but on the mound.
Well, that's Sank's biggest error as the head coach there. The guy who was a closer in the big leagues forever, and he barely pitched an inning at Stony Brook.
Yeah, well, it also could be said that it probably saved him too, because the arm had no mileage on it, and we could have that conversation. But you were kind of one of those next in line guys, and I remember your junior year, you got a lot of press locally, and the buzz was around. I knew a lot of the scouts. Correct me if I'm wrong, you still hold the single season home run record at Stony Brook, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And you still obviously are all over their offensive. You can brag if you want. You're still all over the offensive record books there. And then I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this publicly. How you're not in the Hall of Fame yet blows my mind. That's something that we can get behind and kind of make sure that happens if we have any say. But you were a guy. It's your junior year. You go in the 18th round. The Detroit Tigers take you in the 18th round. Take us back to that, obviously knowing that your parents were such big influences on you, knowing you as well as I do, how your dad was there every step of the way, and that had to be so gratifying for obviously everyone involved. And then you had a decision to make. So take us through that whole process, if you can.
Yeah, so, I mean, you kind of set the story a little bit, but Listen, I was lucky because, Joe, Nathan kind of paved the way a little bit to put Stony Brook on the map, and a couple other guys, but him specifically before us. And listen, Matt Sankt, who's still the head coach, has done a great job with that program, growing it all the way to getting to, Omaha, a few years back. But he's a hitting guy, and that's all he wanted to do. I mean, practice, the only thing we did was and we took 5 minutes of ground balls, and then it was just go ahead and you'd go like, get him over, homer, like homer, you know what I mean? Get him in, homer. Like, that's all he cared about. I didn't know any better. I guess I just, started to develop under some of those guys. And we had a couple of guys that hit a lot of home runs. I just thought it was normal, to be honest with you. And, but they did a great job kind of teaching me, how to become a power hitter. And we also, one of the big things that year too, we had a kid named Chris Flynn, who you know well.
Yep.
Right-handed pitcher, went in the 3rd round to Tampa. He was a bit of a knucklehead, but man, he could pitch. And, it was really good for me because those guys would show up, on the weekend to see him throw. And I knew it. So if they were there to see him, I was just hoping to have a good game and, at the plate, maybe hit one out or something like that. So, but ultimately had a really good year. And kind of the draft came around, but, there was a lot of teams that came and looked at me. I caught a little bit that year. I still, I was playing first base. I caught about 20 games just because I was a left-handed hitting catcher, and we thought it'd be really good for the draft to, put some power with a guy who can catch. And ultimately got drafted by Detroit. One of the big things too, like Jim said, is, I look back at it and I didn't realize it then, but, talking to the scout, I hit a lot of home runs like we talked about, but my thing that was rated highest on my draft card was my arm. And same thing. My dad made me long toss all the time. We talked about it on some of the podcasts, but I think that was a big thing for me. I mean, I could swing the bat, but there was another tool there. Like I said, it was rated higher than my bat. And so I think that helped me as well. Anything you can get in as a feather in the cap, during the draft time is really big. So I had a decision to make. I thought I was going to go earlier. A couple teams I talked to had me in like the 8th to 10th round. When that passed, I was really upset. And at the time we had internet, but it was like live streaming, but it took a while to go. And I remember they were going to take like some kid who had a similar name as me. I think it was Toronto in like the 12th. And his name was like Alex Alexander. It was like a ridiculous name. So, Toronto's up the next pick, and they say Alex, and I like jump up out of my chair, and I'm like waiting for this thing to load. I was like, are you kidding me? And then really the funny part of the story is like in about the 15th round, Detroit called me. My scout was a guy named Buddy Payne, who was a great man. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he'd been in the business for a long time, and said, hey, if we sign you next couple of rounds, would you go? I said, just sign me. We'll figure it out. But I want to play, Ultimately, they picked me in the 18th round, and it was, the rest is, I won't go into that stuff. But it was a great day. Jim and Virgil can speak about, getting the call to go to big leagues. I certainly can't. But that phone call or me seeing on the internet where you get drafted it was amazing. We went right to the store, bought the Detroit hats. It was hard to find in New York, but I think we went to a Lids or something. But it was a great day, and then getting to play and all the experiences was great. But the whole process was nuts, but it was certainly fun. Last thing I'll say about it, you said I had to make a decision. I felt like I did all I can do at Stony Brook, as a player. And again, I had great coaching and stuff like that. I felt like it was the time to go and, try to do it as a professional. And it was fun. It was really good. It was a lot of down times, but a lot of really good times as well. So it was certainly a great experience.
So in 3 years, in 3 seasons at Stony Brook, do you still have the most home runs total
make me do
career?
Yeah, I know the number too. So I
hit
55 homers in 3 years. I had 23 that junior year. I guess we'll talk about a funny story too. So there's this guy named Jeff Van Binscooten was his name. I think that's how you said. He went to Kent State, and we were tied. Another guy named Shelly Duncan, and we were all tied with like 20 homers, 2 weeks to go in the season. Well, I kind of went in a drought, wound up with 23. That's a whole nother story. One of my teammates' parents took us out to dinner, and they still think that they jinxed me or whatever because I really after that. But the story goes, so the kid Josh Van Binscooten from Kent wound up with 31. So he hit 11 homers in 2 weeks to 31. He got drafted as a pitcher. And he never made it to the big leagues, but it was a funny story or whatever. And then Shelley Duncan everyone was talking about Shelley Duncan wanted playing against him, whatever, and obviously made it to the big leagues. But couple of cool little things there with the draft.
Former Yankee, right? And Dave Duncan's son, is that correct? Right?
Correct. And we got in a major brawl with him in Lakeland in 2003 or 4. It was a massive brawl. Like it was.
Did you search him out? Did you search him out and say, let's
I think I ran away from him. He's a big dude, man. He was mad.
He's
he was
huge,
really
man.
Yeah.
He slid he came into second base on a double play and he didn't slide. Threw it right between his eyes and all hell broke loose. So.
So, China, your story, you're one of those guys that was fortunate enough to go through the process twice. I would assume it's your junior year of college was the first time, and then obviously your senior year of college, you get drafted again. Kind of take us through that, and that's very unique. Virgil, we're going to go with yours last because yours is really unique if you just look at the number. But you were a two-time guy, not JUCO to 4-year. It was 4-year junior year, 4-year senior year. So again, you got to kind of go through it twice. Talk a little bit about your whole experience.
Yeah, actually, I was JUCO to D1, so I went through the process. We could say fortunately or unfortunately, I went through it 5 years in a row because high school senior, JUCO, wow. Junior, senior, and I would, like I said in the beginning, I was from such a small town. I didn't have like an agent, an advisor. I knew nothing about the draft, and so the weeks leading up to it with all the phone calls, Alex touched on this a little bit, like, would you sign for this? Would you sign for that? And it was overwhelming, to be completely honest, at first going through that process. But my sophomore year, I was told all the things you want to hear from scouts. We're projecting you 5th through 10th round, at latest 15th, all this stuff. So I was with my mom and family waiting and waiting and waiting. And all the way till day 3 to when I got pissed off, to be completely honest. And we had plans to go to Disneyland to celebrate. And I was like, let's just go. Let's just go. So my first time being drafted, I was on Buzz Lightyear's ride and came out to a voicemail. I had a voicemail from Vince Sagisi, the Indian scout at the time, saying we just drafted you in the 28th round. And my mom, same thing. We had to get the hat. She found somebody in Disneyland wearing an Indian's hat and bought it off his head.
Come on.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool memory. And that was back in the days of a little bit of a loose draft and follow. So they followed me through summer ball, advised me to go back to school, went back to D1 Cal State Northridge, had a great first 6 week as the Friday night guy, was moved to relief. And so slid down the boards. And listening to Jim tell his story, a word just hit me with like perspective, right? Where he thought his career was over and he got a call and could not have been more pumped. And I went in with expectations and was let down, and it almost turned into, at the time, a negative experience, waiting and watching yourself fall, which looking back on it, it's like, what a blessing to be drafted at all. And, you know, there's 30 rounds at that time or whatever there was, and to just be one of the names that got called was a blessing. But because of expectations that were put on it, it turned into a different sort of experience. And so that would be my advice to anybody going through it. Doesn't matter when you're called, especially this year. Guys like me, I would not have been drafted. I would have been in the Wild West, you know, of the signing starting Sunday. But if you do get that call, look at it as a blessing, because regardless of how you feel about it right now, I think we can all attest, years down the road, those of you look back on that memory. Think about my mom running through Disneyland frantically to try to buy a dirty hat off a guy's head. Like, that's a fun experience and a fun memory. And it's all positive. And so, yeah, drafted junior year, my last story I'll tell to kind of bookend, to bring in both parents here. Going out of high school, I wanted to sign. I was young, dumb, I'll sign for 10 grand. That's so much money. I don't care. Like, let's go. And my dad wanted me to get an education. Junior year, I get drafted. The Rays offered me some money. They offered to pay for my schooling. My dad's like, you have to sign, start your professional career, go play. And I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. I was so close, units-wise, to getting my degree in psychology with an emphasis in kinesiology that we had a reverse fight 3 years later. I fought my dad to go back to school. He wanted me to sign and play professionally, and I won. And so I went back, got my degree, and then pursued independent professional ball after that. But yeah, it was some unique draft experiences for sure. I don't know how many guys have been inside shooting Buzz Lightyear characters and no service, getting a voicemail when they come out that they need their shoe size and they need to fax the contract to you and stuff like that. So it was definitely interesting, and just the perspective hit me of, if you just go into it with an open mind and just looking at it, of the cool experience that it is, it does a lot for that. You know, Alex, I was back in that time of the line streaming too, where the pick's buffering and I see the first name Ryan, because that's how I had to turn in my draft card with my real name. And it's like Ryan Smith. Oh, shit. Like, you just get so mad.
I was mad at my dad, actually. He had bad internet. I said, "What?
Yeah.
Can we get some good internet?"
Yeah, exactly.
All there was dial up back then.
Yeah,
Come on,
that's
Verge.
true.
So, China, talk a little bit about, I mean, that's pretty unique. You get drafted as a junior and decide not to go, knowing probably the risk as well. Things don't work out your senior year. You know, injuries could happen. Anything could happen. You could just not get drafted. Like, was that obviously going back, getting your degree and experiencing college baseball for another year was more important to you, where I think that's probably a unique thing in a way. I think most guys probably just go play pro ball, kind of finish at the end, and hopefully come back around and get their degree. What really drove you to turn that down and go back?
I mean, I think a number of factors at the time. I think subconsciously I knew, maybe psychologically, I wasn't ready to go. The junior year had gone so uniquely in the sense that the first 6 weeks, you cannot script them better. I was Friday night guy playing against top 15 teams, pitching at Pepperdine, Texas Tech, and shoving. And then head coach move, regardless of the reasons. He wanted to get a freshman to start, wanted me to be a reliever. And so I just, just my draft stock, talking to scouts, were like, we're not drafting a middle reliever, like a Friday night guy. Sorry, like, you're not going to get exposure. And so I think I had some more to prove on a competitive level at the college level. I wanted to go back, prove coaches wrong, which I ended up transferring anyway. But education became more important to me throughout college. As I got, especially, you finish your general education, which are subjects you have to take, statistics, history, stuff that you're not choosing. And then you get to your upper graduate classes where you literally, if you care, are choosing the classes that you get to take. I was looking at sports psychology and things that I had passion about, and I was having fun with the education as much as I was with the baseball. And so I saw too many guys before me at Cal State Northridge or COC, College of the Canyons, which was my JUCO, that would sign for 50 grand and then be pushing carts in Costco 3 years later because they got cut, they didn't have an education, and they didn't, necessarily prioritize the education in their negotiations, where MLB has a great scholarship program. Well, a lot of times they'll help you pay for school after you're done playing, but it's a long-winded answer, but I think it was a multitude of reasons. I wanted to compete. I had something to prove. I love the education factor, and I wanted to get my degree. It was something that no one in my family had done to that point. And so that was kind of all the factors that led to me ultimately going back and then transferring anyway away from that coach.
And then it obviously feels nice when you do, in fact, get your degree. Then you could just go play. It's not hanging over your head to go and finish. So you did have it in your back pocket.
Correct.
Yep. And one thing I want to bring up with Alex is, it's very difficult to go back and finish school. And I give Alex a lot of credit. He not only went back, got his undergrad degree taken care of, he also obtained his master's degree while coaching, which is very, very hard and was
Check that. I'm still not done with the masters. It's been a long process.
All right, well, the structure I just said, I'm not impressed with you at all, and you really haven't accomplished anything. So,
listen, if you want to give me honorary, I mean, I would take it. I'm a couple credits away. So if you want,
I'll see if I can get you an honorary degree. I think Billy Joel has a couple, and guys like that. So I think you should probably get one, right? We'll see. We'll see what we can do. But to my point, Al, you went back to Stony Brook, I believe, right? In the offseason, got it done. And then
I went back. It was really like China was saying. I had the Major League Baseball paid for it, and it was really important to me to go back as soon as I could. I got lucky and I guess unlucky, but I didn't go to Instructs the first year, so I was able to go back to school. And then I went the second year as well, and then the following year I actually went to Instructs, so it worked out perfectly. But it was important to me to get it done quickly, so it wasn't hanging over my head for a long time.
So you played a season essentially of pro baseball and then got to go back in the fall back to Stony Brook, right? And, with the social scene on college campuses and the things that entails, that's not a bad thing either. You got a lot to talk about, some openers, so to speak, to, enhance your social experience. So that wasn't awful.
I actually, I couldn't believe how easy school was without practice and lift. And I was so bored. I did really well in school.
Last but not least, Virgil has the distinction of obviously getting, as I mentioned, getting drafted twice, and it happened to be in the same round, which is probably just luck or whatever it is. Virgil, you were a 7th-round pick your first time around, and then obviously the second time around a 7th-round pick. So I guess that just qualifies you as, an absolute stud going in the first 10 rounds twice. So kind of talk us through that whole thing. And again, the first time around, going in the 7th round, you generally do have a decision to make. You get drafted in the 7th round, and that is a decision because I assume that high in the draft, getting picked, there is some type of push and pull, whether to continue in college or to go and play pro ball right there. Kind of take us through that whole thing if you can.
Yeah, so my senior year of high school, I had a good buddy on my team, and we played long toss during the week, and we just tried to break each other's gloves. Like if you want to, and it became the thought, if you want to throw hard, you just got to practice throwing hard. And I gained a mile an hour every week, every start. So then I ended up touching like 92 in high school. 90, if you hit 90 miles an hour back 2003, you were throwing gas. And so I ended up getting an agent. And I learned a lot through that experience because I felt like he was going to support me. But I didn't know anything about it because when you pick this guy, he's representing your name. He's representing your words to an organization. He's negotiating. And so I ended up getting drafted. I don't really remember that draft day, so to speak. I remember out of college better, but my high school experience was more like this guy, like I got drafted and he never called me. Like I'm the one that like me and my dad negotiated with the team. Me and my dad did all the stuff. And so they came at me, like my slot was, I don't know, 120 grand or whatever. And they offered me 70. And we're like, well, last year a high school pitcher got 240. We want 240. We're just like, that's what he got last year. We just want average. I want to play. Like, I don't want more than that. It's just like last year, if you look in the 7th round, a high school kid got 240, high school pitcher. The guy's like, yeah, we'll give you 70. I was like, all right. But then what happened was I had a scholarship to UC Santa Barbara, and a guy got drafted in like the 2nd or 3rd round, and he signed. So they upped my scholarship to a full ride. And so this like kind of negative experience with the agent, with the negotiating, with like, I don't know what's going on, to getting a full ride to go to a local school in my hometown near my parents. It just kind of really just weighed towards that. And as I look back on it, it's probably one of the most defining moments because I was a kid and going to college and having, 3 years under my belt, living on my own, training on like having a regimen, having to feed myself, having to do different things, like helped me mature so that when I ended up getting drafted, I had like some like substance underneath me, some foundation where now when I go into pro ball where it's, it's just baseball and I don't want to say it's a dog eat dog world because it's not like that anymore. It's a development world, but it really helped to go to college. So that was my my high school. That was my high school experience. But then I kind of felt what Alex felt in my college experience because, like China was saying, they're like, oh, you're going to be top 5, this. And so you go, it's like 3, 4, you're like, I had like people at my house and I go in the backyard. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? Like what's happening? Like I'm not 6. And they say, oh, your name's been called in the 7th. I'm like, woohoo. It's like, we had like local TV was at my house too. So I did like an interview, like, it was, but after like China was saying, it was that expectation, like rather than just being blessed, just like, wow, okay, someone wants me to come play for them. They're going to pay me this amount up front, so just that expectation set me up kind of for that feeling and that, but I also had like a better experience with my agent. I picked a different agent. It was really smooth. He was really helpful, supportive. And so, then that went well. And also my junior year, I'm like, I'm just going to go play it. And I didn't really care what it was. I just want average. I just want to go play. So I guess that's my experience. I guess when I got there too, I waited a couple weeks. So I'll give my first story. I get to Oneonta, New York. I go in the locker room like two weeks late to the season, and the manager looks at me. He's like, with some explicit is, he's like, what the heck is that on your lip? Because I had like a little like flavor saver, and you're 20 minutes late to the bus. Get your ass on the bus. I'm like, all right. So I pack my stuff. I get to the club, you get my uniform, and I go yellow school bus, right? Like walk on with my backpack. And I felt like Forrest Gump, like everybody like slid over, like, so I couldn't sit there. And we had this one guy, Andy Baldwin, he looks up and he scoots over. He's like, you can sit here if you want, this like Kentucky's like sweetheart. So, and then the whole transition into pro ball. But the draft day is a beautiful day, going open mind, and this year is going to be a little different with those 5 rounds and the free agents. So expectations might be set up a little even different. But once you get in the game, it's about playing, competing. Everybody really has a chance. I know from my organization, all drafts, if you show up and you're playing and you're putting the work, everybody has a chance to get to the big leagues. That's the goal.
So from and China, you can attest to this too, obviously going through it where you were 2-time draft guys. You mentioned it, Virgil, where you got to your junior year and just said, I'm just going to go pitch and I'm going to play. And do you think going through it one time earlier or multiple times or whatever it was, do you think that really helped kind of take that pressure off in a sense, like of, hey, I'm just going to go out there and pitch. I know kind of the process. I know I've been through it. I've had my name called. That's got to be an enormous lift in terms of, I just need to go out and pitch. I've done this already. I've been drafted. That had to help, I would assume, in the normal anxiety of a guy who never got drafted and is really trying to obviously achieve that goal and that dream. Probably kind of took, I would assume, some of that anxiety and pressure off in a way. Am I off on that?
I don't know. For me, I was a little different than China. China's got more into school. I got farther away from school. I was like, I just want to play ball. It was just my personality. I'm more of a learner now in my life than I was back then. It was more just baseball. I don't know. I still had this like inside of me because you don't know if they're going to call your name. You really have no control. You have no control of when or who. Like I never talked to the Tigers, and that's what me and Trez. They never talked to me. I never did anything with them, and they're the ones that drafted me. So they were kind of in the background a little bit. What was it like for you, China?
Yeah, mine was, I don't think the anxiety was gone because my junior year, which was the second time really going through it, I had more expectations and I really wanted it more to go higher. There was more negotiation because they knew it was my junior year. They wanted to see what's the number that it's going to take to get you to sign and get you to go. And so, like, especially I'm trying to remember how the format was back then, but I think day 2, they did rounds like 6 through 20 or something like that. And so there was calls every hour during that second day, like, would you sign for this? And then it's like, well, I don't. And at any little bit of like hesitation, it was click and they're on to the next guy and you're not getting drafted. They want a yes. An astounding yes. And like Alex touched on that, it's like, hey, just get it done and we'll talk about it then. That's should have been my response. Like, yeah, absolutely, I'll sign. I didn't know because I should be like, yeah, and then have them draft me and then negotiate. But there was still angst, and because I knew the conversations coming, because I knew what was in my heart about school, and not that I was afraid of my pops, but I knew that conversation was gonna be a little bit tough where he was gonna be like, get away from this environment where you're at right now. The coach, you couldn't have done anything more. You need to go. Sign, take this opportunity and go. And I kind of knew I wasn't ready or didn't want to. So there was still quite a bit of angst because of the unique situation that it was more real the second time is how it went for me.
So, Jimmy, looking back on all these stories, typically, of course, yours was the easiest road, right? You get one call, come throw some balls from the outfield. Here's 1,500. Can I get more? No, and you're off. I mean, that was really, that's basically, you had the easiest path if you think about it. And it's funny to joke about now. You ended up getting to the big leagues. But at the end of the day, yours is pretty seamless. It was all of about, 2 hours in total time between the tryout, the negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, listening to this is eye-opening. I never really thought about draft day as a negative experience. This was very interesting to me. I was coming at it from a totally different place. No expectation, actually beyond zero expectations. No one, including myself, thought would be drafted. And so when they said, yeah, we're drafting, I'm like, where do I sign? I'm ready to go. Let's do this. So this is very, very interesting. Great advice from these guys. I'm learning. I hope the audience enjoys this because this is really an eye-opening experience for me.
Yeah, well, I do my best to take things as positive as getting drafted and turn them negative. That's really what we want. Go ahead, China. I'm sorry. I knew you wanted to chime in.
No, I just wanted to jump in on Jim's story because I've obviously been around him for years, and anybody listening, obviously this group has so many different stories. There's not one way to get drafted. There's not one path to success in athletics. And I remember years ago, I was bored at the office, not doing my job as usual, Jim, and I Googled Jim Batcher, right? And I found basically an obituary on his baseball career, an article from 1987, Vashkins, or what? I think it was 87. And it was this, they were kind of like painting the picture of the great season he had at Cal State Northridge, and that, when you're 6 feet, when you're less than 6 feet, you might as well be 6 feet under in baseball or something like that. And that article gives me goosebumps right now telling the story because they were basically, his career's over as a senior in college. And he got one opportunity and made beyond the most of that opportunity. He played 15 years professionally, made it to the big leagues with 3 different teams, and won championships on 3 different continents: a minor league championship in the United States, a championship in the Taiwan Baseball League, and a championship in Italy because of that one opportunity. And so if there's negatives about your career or, your situation isn't exactly how you want it, there are so many stories about different paths to where we all want to be. And so don't judge your situation too negatively. Just prepare your body, prepare your mind so that when that opportunity comes, like he said, the first thing that guy did was put him in right field, put a guy on third base. He made a first impression. 15 years later, lots of hair later, obviously, he had an amazing career and has impacted lives all over the freaking world with his career. So I just wanted to touch on that because his story is so cool.
Yeah, and that kind of like brings us back to the quarantine, right? Is like, what are you doing right now? Like you might get a call. You got to stay ready. And it's like when being in the minor leagues, going to the big leagues too. You don't know when you're going to get that call. They say like it never happens on your time, So you have to be ready. And so it's about putting in that work. And when you're putting in the work, you're also learning about how to perfect your craft. So I just give it to Jim. Like you got to, you never know what that moment's going to call, and that preparation, it really pays off.
And I'm going to take full credit for one of those championships. The one in Italy was obviously, as Jim has mentioned, I was the key cog in that whole thing, which I believe. And
warm-up pitches.
That one. Yeah, we don't need. Yeah, that's the one thing about the everyday throwing show is we cannot warm up and still pitch and get guys out. That was a previous episode. I'm sure it'll resurface again. I don't want to take up any more of anyone's time here. Before we go, obviously, thank you so much for coming on. China obviously joining us tonight. My trusted compadres here on our show. Thank you again. The stories, the insight, the information, great as always. This podcast, this show is dedicated to talking about the great sport, obviously, of baseball, usually diving deep into the throwing aspect. Today we did something because of the draft, which I thought was important. And I appreciate you guys for coming on. Appreciate you taking the time as always. China, we'd love to have you on again down the road if your schedule permits. We'll obviously have you back on. But where can we find everyone? Alex, Virgil, let us know. Where can we look at the product? Where can we find you on social media? And how can we get in touch?
Yeah, so revolutionthrowing.com, at Revolution Throwing on Instagram, Facebook, and then Twitter is Rev Throwing. And also our phone number is up on the website. You can call us, text us. We're here to help.
Trez, you can give out, Alex, you can give out your phone number if you'd like. You can give us, whatever you kind of cover.
I'm good. I field a lot of calls during the day from 15 and 16-year-old baseball players. I'm good. Calls for tonight. For tonight.
Now, China, this is usually where I ask Jim, where we can find them. I usually get some type of email address. I get maybe, if I go down the block and get in the phone booth, I can use the payphone to call the office. So give us, you're the guru in my mind of that triumvirate. You can tell us where to find everything. How can we find Jaeger Sports? How can we find you? Social media, just lay it all out there.
Yeah, well, for your audience, Jim, I know you're in the office, so I know your stuff is up in your bowl right there. If you could show everybody your cell phone right now, I think that would add a lot of value to the show. I don't think anybody's seen a relic like
Yeah, it's a StarTAC. I was going to
yes, baby. So, yes, I can field this question for Jaeger Sports. Jaegersports.com, just like the shirt that Jim and I'm wearing today. And if you go on social media, at Jaeger Sports, that's on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Alan's very active on Twitter. If you have any questions, he's amazing with that stuff. And that's where you can find us. We're pretty good. All of our emails are on the website. You can get to us. Any questions. That's why we do what we do. Our passion is teaching. And so there isn't a stupid question, but just don't send Jim any pictures on his cell phone or it might explode.
Once again, guys, thanks again for coming on. You can find me at this podcast and in every other place you don't want to look. We will be back, the Take It Deep podcast, as well as the Everyday Throwing Show. Thanks you for tuning in. We will see you soon. Stay safe. This is a time where hopefully we can get out from under the things we've been dealing with the last few months, and we can kind of get back to normal. More importantly, get back to throwing, get back to baseball. Be well, everybody. We'll see you next time.